right. Good evening, everybody. We are getting ready for our show, waiting on the guests to arrive into the podcast. I'm so excited for this show. I think it's going to be a really, really good one. Very excited. Very, very, very excited. So we'll just wait for Dan and our guest, Todd Sullivan, to come in. Hopefully it will be quick and we will get this ball rolling. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Eva. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. I'll let Todd know that I'm in.
Yep. Super, super excited for tonight. Okay. Hi, Donna. How are you? I see you've joined.
And I'm just waiting for Todd, who I've been communicating with here.
Awesome.
Okay. Might be a delay all the way from South Korea. We'll see.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Mm-hmm.
We can just hear the
Denevius, I think that's him.
Jeopardy.
I'll ask him.
Todd, are you in?
I think that's him, Denevius. I want to double check.
Tell him to click the link.
Hang on.
In the email now.
Yes. Okay. So it is him, Denevius. So if he, are you able to bring him in manually?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Click. Okay. So he's in the studio.
Yes. We just need him to click the link. So it.
Okay.
It registers him as a caller. Lovely technology.
I had to click the link twice.
Yeah, there's gotta be an easier way.
All right, we're almost there. We're close. We're all so close. Okay, hang on. Try it one more time. Okay. Yep.
Worst case, we have a backup.
We do, but he's so close. I feel like we're just going to get him on in just a second here. So thank you, everybody, for your patience as we, once again, just the link up is always the most important, lengthy process,
Yeah, I wish there was a way to do it before and have everybody in. There's got to be a way. I need to do some YouTube video watching on Podbean and see kind of what our choices are.
Okay, one more try here. Message coming in from him.
He is in South Korea, though.
He is in the room, he says. Yep. He hears us speaking.
Yeah, but he can't speak. So let me see.
All right. Is there a way to call out?
I wish.
Oh,
wait. Wants to call in. Invite. Hang on,
Denevius. Todd.
Tell him I just sent him an invite.
Denevius
is a speaker
live.
Now. Are you there?
Okay.
Are you there, Todd?
Can you hear me?
Oh,
yes.
I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I have no clue how. So.
Yeah.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes. Yeah. What's the weather like where you are in South Korea?
It's pretty cold here right now. It was snowing a lot the day before yesterday. And it's probably about 24 degrees, and with the wind chill, this maybe feels like it's 14 degrees.
Ay. Okay.
So it's actually a little warmer here, but not much. Not much.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting that we have kind of the same, I guess I have to look. We might be on the same kind of parallel
latitude or something.
Yeah. All right.
Well, Eva, you want to take it away?
Sure. So welcome to VampChat with Dan and Eva, a podcast devoted to vampire fiction, fanged folklore, and the gothic imagination. I'm Eva Vertreese, author of the Fury trilogy. Book 1 of Fury is currently out, with book A Hellish Fury coming later this year. God, I hope.
And I'm Dan Klefstad, author of Fiona's Guardians and its forthcoming sequel, which hopefully will also be out this year. God, I hope.
So, Dan, season 2 of VampChat is, oh my God, it's off to such a great start. So last week we had the most amazing conversation with Dacre Stoker about his uncle Bram. And I'm telling you right now, if anybody is in the chat and hasn't listened to that, you've got to. You know, we talked about Dacre's own Dracula novels. We talked about his uncle Bram, the trip he'll lead to Transylvania this summer. And we also spoke on a different podcast with James Heberger and about his vampire versus werewolf novel, Legacy of the Moon, which was phenomenal.
And we have another fascinating guest who we'll introduce in just a moment. First, I want to tease our Fanged Folklore segment. And Eva, I understand you've been researching accounts of revenants in 12th century England.
That's right. And we're going to have a little bit of fun doing some research for this segment.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait to learn more. So, Eva, normally we rest in our coffins during our off weeks. But this week we've risen early for, can you guess?
Well, it's the Lunar New Year, so I'm going to guess dim sum.
No, not exactly, although I love that endless procession of plates with beautifully presented delicacies.
Actually, I prefer goth dim sum with eyeball dumplings, maybe some marinated human hearts and spring rolls wrapped in human skin, maybe.
Goth dim sum, perfect for a New Year's feast, and quite fitting because we've invited an author of extreme horror to join us.
That's right. Todd Sullivan is on the line all the way from South Korea. He's the author of the vampire novel called Butchers. Todd, I was going to say good evening, but it's actually Thursday morning for you, so I'll keep it simple and just say welcome to VampChat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy you guys invited me to join your show today.
Yeah, well, we're going to have a lot of fun. Todd, you set your novel in Seoul, South Korea. I want to begin with the secret organization you've imagined called I hope I'm pronouncing this, the Gwanlyo. This is a sort of vampire mafia that governs the behavior of the undead, making sure they don't kill humans when they feed off them. The Gwanlyo also regulates how vampires comport themselves in public so they don't stand out. I should note that your vampires move and speak blurringly fast, so newly created vampires are taught to walk and talk slowly to appear human. And the process of creating new vampires is brutal, occurring in a special room where any shred of humanity is beaten out of them. Where did you get the idea for the Gwanlyo?
Yeah, that's actually a very accurate depiction of the organization. So the Guano came from, actually the story themselves, the vampire series is basically about having a very, very bad job for the rest of your life. And the idea actually came from having bad jobs where you feel like the place you're working for just sucks everything out of you.
Sorry, is this a memoir, Todd?
It's not a memoir, no, but I have had bad jobs, and I think many people can relate to having had bad employment at different places, which is why the word vampire never actually comes into the story. It's on the cover, but never comes into the story. They're called employees, because that's essentially what the vampire story is a metaphor for. In this particular book, it's a metaphor for having bad work, basically.
God, I love that. So within the Gwanlyo, there's an elite group called the Natural Police that hunt and arrest anyone who violates the rules. And we meet two officers right at the beginning, Mingun and his superior. They're clinging to the outside of an apartment building about to arrest another vampire, Chil Yu, and I hope I'm pronouncing these correctly. He's and Chil Yu is consorting with a human. She's a love-struck high school senior girl named Saimi. The officers enter the apartment carrying bone saws and an axe, and it's clear that they're hoping that Chil Yu resists so they can butcher him. But during the battle, Chil Yu kills he kills the senior officer, and in response, Mingun kidnaps Saimi, she was scheduled to be kidnapped eventually. So why has this innocent girl become the focus of the Gwanlyo?
So this story the story itself has a very long process because it came from a book that I wrote called The Natural Police. And it's the first book that I wrote involving these characters when I was still living on Jeju Island. And this was probably about 12 years ago. And The Natural Police was actually picked up by a publisher called Zarme. that held on to it for about a year and a half before they went out of business. They went bankrupt. So that's where that came from. The natural police is, I don't know, it's just an idea that I had when I was living in Jeju about the people who keep other people in control, which I think is also kind of a common theme. And yeah, that's what that particular idea came from, the natural police.
Well, and we should also note that Saimi she's actually related to Chil-yu. She's his grandniece, which explains why he's so protective of her.
Right. This is why he wants to interact with her, because she reminds him of being human, because he was changed. Like all the other characters, they kind of change against their will, and more or less against their will. And so for him, Seimi reminds him of what it was like when he was alive with his family. She is a blood relative of his, and so she kind of feels differently towards her than he probably would towards just regular humans who don't share his blood, basically.
So again, why is she the focus of the Guanlio?
Well, she's based upon a person. She's likely based upon a person that I met, and she was going to be the main focus of the book. Like in National Police, the book, she was going to be the main focus. It's going to kind of be like a bildungsroman where it begins off with her starting off at the very beginning, like a kind of a not very powerful character, but then over time she was going to become a very big thorn for the Guano itself. But that's actually changed a bit. So she was the focus of the narrative before, but when I wrote Butchers, I realized that more people had a more visceral reaction to Harry. And so honestly, in book 2, and then the book I just finished, A Soul a Day, the main focus is actually Harry. It's not actually Seimi.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to talk about what happens next to Seimi. But first I want to switch back to Chol-yu, who was weakened and seriously disfigured from that battle that took place in the apartment. He's missing an ear and a bone saw cut halfway through his cervical column, so his head tilts to one side. He needs help, so he seeks refuge from a friend. You mentioned another vampire named Harry. And she just laughs out loud. She cackles when she sees Chol-yu and the condition he's in. And then so she just suddenly takes a bunch of photos of him. Then, while stitching his neck wound, Harry makes a deal with Chol-yu. She will give him some of her blood, which will make him heal faster, if he accompanies her on a killing spree, which is against the rules. Give us some background on why Harry is so rebellious, but also so sadistic toward humans.
So most of the characters that I write are based upon people who I met. I mean, they're based upon, they're not the person himself.
I would hope not.
And when I was teaching in Jeju, an elementary school student, I met a young student who just had serious issues. She was very rebellious, but she had also other issues too. And so that's basically where her character came from. My character is based upon this girl who's just very, anyway, she had a lot of serious issues. And that's where Harry kind of comes from. And that's why Harry is the way she is in the book. She is the kind of chaos in the world of the Guanlo, because the Guanlo is trying to make everything very orderly amongst what the employees. They want everything to be very orderly. But Harry is the person who you just can't keep her orderly. You could do anything you want to. You could try these different methods of trying to keep her under control, but it's just not going to happen. She is the chaos in the narrative universe, which is why I think people kind of relate to her a lot. Which is why the next novella as well as a novel follows her much more than follows Seimi.
She is definitely one to, I won't say that I relate to her, but there's something about that character.
I hope
not. I don't want to scare anybody. But she is a very memorable character. I mean, very memorable character.
Agreed.
So, yeah. Okay, well, let's get back to Seimi. So she wakes up at the Guanlo facility after she's been kidnapped, and she's given a choice: either die or become a vampire and therefore a Guanlo employee. So that was that choice. They're given a choice, but they're not really given a choice. And this is explained calmly by Mingun, the officer we met earlier, but the one supervising her transformation he's diabolical, day low. And here I'll issue a content warning for sexual assault, because day low brutalizes her in the most horrific ways imaginable. This is a really barbaric way for humans to become vampires. So why did you choose to make the transformation process so violent?
Again, this is a metaphor for work, and I do think that again, a really bad job can feel like emotional or spiritual torture to people. And this is a book, so I wanted to make it much more exciting than just something that was emotionally or spiritually very bad for a person. But yeah, I mean, this is why the process is so extreme. It's because they are trying to put her in line. They want her to be like another brick in the wall, to quote Pink Floyd, another cog in the system. And in order to do so, you break people down to their barriers, to their most. Anyway, you break people down as much as possible. Then you can build them up again afterwards. And that's what the Guanlo does to its employees. They break them down as much as possible. Then they build them back up into this individual that they want them to be, in order to best serve the corporation that exists over them.
Break them down so you can build them back up again. Todd, I've never served in the military, but that's something that I've always heard was kind of like what boot camp was all about. Is there any connection there at all with that?
Well, I mean, I read a lot and I watch a lot of videos on YouTube, and I try to explore as many different things as possible. But I mean, I think in like fascist societies, it's basically the same way, where you want people to listen to orders, whether or not they are reasonable or not, and that's the Guano wants from the employees. They want them to listen to orders, and in a way, it kind of, I can say it almost kind of makes sense, because Harry, who doesn't listen to orders, is actually quite dangerous to humans, at least, and to her other employees. And so you have like one or two options. You have like a figure like Sammy, who they're trying to break down to make into this, and the other characters, other employees. Or you have someone like Harry, who just does her own thing, but she's like really quite, bad for the system, for both the vampires and the humans themselves.
Yeah. Now, incredibly, Save Me survives her traumatic transformation and undergoes training in how to act like a human. Min Gun of the Natural Police is charged with her training, and Save Me progresses enough to where Dai Lo takes over again, and he just wants her to fail so he can resume torturing her. So he takes her to a busy cafe and buys plate after plate of human food and orders her to eat it. She complies, but struggles to keep it down without throwing up, because vampires can't eat human food. Then, right at the point where she's about to get sick, Dai Lo announces that the Guanlo are ready to hire her, not just as a regular employee, but as an officer of the Natural Police. She signs the contract and then vomits up everything she ate right in front of everyone in the cafe. This act of drawing unneeded attention gives Dai Lo another excuse to, drag her back into the torture room, which is, torture doesn't even begin to describe it, I suppose.
Right, that's basically is how it goes. And there's like a cultural subtext in there that may be a little something to see, because the reason why Delo treats her so poorly, because there's a point in the novel in which she kind of embarrasses him. And in Asian cultures and here in Korea, you don't want to embarrass the people who are above you on the hierarchy. Like they're like the people who are above you, like your managers or something like that. You never want to embarrass them in front of people, but she does, and that's actually where a lot of Delo's animosity towards Seibi comes from, because she kind of embarrassed him and hurt his honor in the corporation, and so for that he's extremely upset, and that's why he wants her to suffer as much as possible. It's kind of like a vengeful thing he's enacted upon her for that slight she caused him.
Well, and we'll issue another content warning for sexual violence, because this time it is especially graphic. But while all this is going on, Chilyu and Harry mount a rescue operation, which involves burning the Guanlo headquarters. And there's a climactic battle to save Sei-mi. And we don't want to spoil how the book ends, but you definitely leave it open for a sequel. So tell us a bit about the next book in the series, The Gray Man of Smoke and Shadows.
So in the Gray Man of Smoke and Shadows, again, because Harry was the person that many of the people who read the book enjoy her character the most, the Gray Man of Smoke and Shadows basically follows her story as she tries to take revenge upon her uncle, because the student that I taught, again, like 12, 13 years ago, she lived with her uncle, and she was abused by, like, in real life, she was actually abused by her uncle. And I always kind of felt that that was probably part of what caused her to be such a chaotic figure at school, basically.
Uh-huh.
And so basically in the story, The Gray Man Smoking Shadows, Harry is going to take revenge upon her uncle. But at the same time, she's being hunted by the Guanlo because she's broken numerous rules at this point and has actually killed other employees and humans as well. And so while she is being hunted, she is actually hunting her uncle from the past.
Okay, all right. Now, I'd like to go back to when you first became interested in vampires, Todd. So what are some of the books or films that inspired you to write in this genre?
I probably first became interested in vampires, honestly, from Sesame Street, but Count. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Sesame Street, but the Count
I
was
love
my
the
favorite
Count. I
character.
love the Count.
From like this is when I was probably in kindergarten. But then after that, my older brother was a Dungeons and Dragons player. This is in the 80s, so it's quite a long time ago. And the campaign that captured my attention the most was the Ravenloft campaign with Strahd. And I read that numerous times growing up. And then my brother, again, my older brother was also interested into Anne Rice because I'm originally from New Orleans. And I
Oh,
still
yeah.
remember to this day my older brother talking to my mom about this book about a vampire who's interviewed by a human, and this is the story that the book is about. Interview the vampire, and so I had that on my shelf. I read that and the Vampire Lestat, and it just began from there. I mean, it's just something that was always a big draw for me. And yeah, I mean, I started writing vampire stories when I was still in high school, and I never stopped. And eventually I wrote Natural Police, and then from Natural Police came Butchers, The Gray Man Smoking Shadows, and then finally the novel, A Soul a Day.
Nice. I'm a huge Anne Rice fan, and New Orleans is one of my all-time favorite places in the world. And I try to
Same.
get there as often as I can. So, Todd, is there something unique about South Korean fiction that makes vampires especially violent? Because I've seen a lot, I don't want to say anime, but a lot of anime, there's a particular violent quality to it. And to piggyback on that, a second question is, what drew you to the extreme horror genre?
So let's do the first question first. I do think that my first introduction to Korean cinema, I guess, was a movie called Old Boy. And for your audience, who everyone's seen it, Old Boy is a very violent movie. And I do think haven't seen it, Squid Game, but I've heard that it's also
Yeah,
quite violent
it's
too.
violent. Yeah.
But I think part of it is that in Asian culture, but I could definitely say for Korea, where I've been for 14 years, there is a repression that happens. So people tend to keep a lot of their emotions down inside themselves. But I think that kind of, when you use your imagination, it goes into very dark places, which is why I think a lot of the narratives of fiction here can be quite violent, actually. It's a way of kind of releasing everything you keep down, that you're repressing throughout your job, your daily life, and things like that. So I think that's where the violence comes from. What's the second question, actually?
What drew you to the extreme horror genre?
Oh, the thing about that is that I actually don't really consider this to be extreme horror. And that, like, people who reviewed it actually think it's more like dark fantasy than anything else. Like that final scene in the end between Seimi and Cho Yu, I actually added it up. It's about 250 words. It's
Uh-huh.
very short, believe it or not, but the novella itself is 30,000 words. So it's actually a very small portion
Uh-huh.
of the book itself. But I put extreme horror on that because I want people to be aware that there is something in the book that it's almost like a trigger warning. I want people to be aware of picks it up. There is something in the book that is quite visceral and violent.
Yep.
And that's actually why I put extreme horror. But I think it's probably more dark fantasy because that one scene, and then in the next book, The Great Man Smoking Shadows, there actually isn't a scene like that. And then in the A Soul a Day, there isn't a scene like that either. So it's really only that 250 word description, which is why I put extreme horror on there. It's just a way of warning people before they pick up the book. There's something probably in there that you should just be aware of.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Todd Sullivan, author of the novel Butchers. Todd, stay with us for just a second while we tease the final segment of the show where we review a movie or TV series. And Dan, I understand you're reviewing a Swedish vampire film from 2008.
Yes, Let the Right One In is a film about a 12-year-old boy named Oscar who's a frequent victim of bullying. Then he befriends a new neighbor who appears to be a 12-year-old girl named Ellie. But as she says at least once in the film, I am not a girl.
Okay, I'm so looking forward to that. All right, Todd, back to you. During VampChat, we ask each of our guests the same 4 vampy questions. Dan, you want to begin?
All right, yes. Who, Todd, is your favorite vampire of all time and why?
Just off the head, I would probably say Alucard from Hellsing. And why? Because he's just Hellsing OVAs is a really, really cool Japanese anime. It just takes you in different directions with the vampire that you hadn't really thought of before. So off the top of my head, Alucard from Hellsing.
All
OVA.
right. So what vampire power do you wish you had?
What vampire power I wish I had? I suppose, like in the one I just wrote, one of the vampires can see slightly ahead in time, so maybe about 5 minutes ahead of time she can see. And so that would probably be pretty cool to be able to see slightly ahead of time, not like really far, but slightly. That might be pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that sounds so.
Yeah.
Okay, are you Team Louis or Team Lestat?
Oh, Lestat, I suppose.
Okay. Eva's winning here.
I'm pulling ahead.
For those who have never heard the show before, Eva and I have a running competition. I'm more Team Louis, and she is Team Lestat. And our guests, now we have 5 of our guests have said Team Lestat, agreeing with Eva, and 3 have agreed with me as being on Team Louis, and we have 1 tie. So Eva pulls ahead by 2.
So I just want to make a quick comment about the vampire power, Todd, because that is a trope I have not heard of. Have you heard of that, Dan?
Not short-term clairvoyance? No, I have not heard of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. So the final question is, would you want to be turned into a vampire, and if so, why?
No, like when I wrote this book, I wanted people to feel like they would never want to be a vampire because in a lot of vampire fiction, it seduces, it's very seductive, it makes vampires seem very cool. But I was trying to do something kind of different, and so within the narrative universe that I wrote, I would not want to be a vampire. No.
You'd be back at a really
very
bad job.
definite there.
You'd be back at a really bad job.
Yeah, but I think maybe you are the first guest we've had who said no, I wouldn't want to be a vampire. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Todd Sullivan, thank you so much for coming onto VampChat. It's been a wild ride talking with you about Butchers. Where can our listeners find your books?
They can find it at any bookstore. I mean, they can order it through any bookstore, let's put it that way. And they can also get it most easily from Amazon.com. That's always the easiest place to get it at.
Okay. And where can we learn more about you and, any events that you're having, book signings, things like that?
Definitely my Facebook page, which is just Todd Sullivan. I have a YouTube channel, which is again just Todd Sullivan. Also, I'm on Instagram at Denivius, on Twitter. I don't really use Twitter very much, so you can find me there. Probably the easiest place is just my Facebook page. Probably Facebook. But before, I want to say really fast that I actually read the book Let the Right One In. I don't know if you have. It's actually quite different from the movie. So if you haven't read the book, definitely read the book too.
Yeah.
I agree 100% with you, Todd. The book is, I think, even superior, I think. Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on, Todd. Happy Lunar New Year, by the way.
Yeah, you too. Happy Lunar New Year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you guys have a good, I think it's evening for you. So hope you have a very good evening.
Well, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was really cool. It's a really, really good book. It really is. It's definitely, it's not a long read because it is a novella. And it's impactful. It is impactful.
Yeah, you're right. The characters and some of the scenes remain with me. Days, a week or so after I've read the book. So
yeah, and I have to go to one section with Hayeri where they're describing. So apparently she did something bad, and they put her kind of in a really horrific timeout. I mean, it was horrific, and I'm not even going to go into what they did, but I don't think I will ever forget her timeout. I mean, I was like, wow, you hear about these vampire covens and stuff that, even in Interview with a Vampire, they put Louis in the coffin and they put him upside down and they, bricked him up and they were going to keep him there for, and I'm like, even that pales in comparison to the timeout that she got.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever use the words timeout again, actually. Well, all right. We have arrived at the fanged folklore part of our show. And Eva, I understand you've been researching an account of Revenants from 12th century England.
I have. So we are going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to play a game. So are you up for this?
I don't know. What kind of game is this?
Okay, so we're going to play folklorologist. How you like that?
Folklorologist. Hey, does this pay well? Or what about the benefits of being a folklorologist? Are they the retirement, that kind of thing?
No, sorry. You got to get your own IRA and all that good stuff. But we're going to look at some historical facts, piece them together, and we're going to come up with a hypothesis based on our extensive experience in education.
Ooh, well, this ought to be interesting.
All right. So first, since we've got a pretty good handle on what a vampire is, right?
Well, at this point, I would like to think that you and I are almost experts at this point.
Okay. So I now want to explain what a revenant is. So, per the mighty Google.
Lord Google.
I know,
Please tell us more.
Lord Google. So there are two schools on where the word revenant came from. So one is from Latin, Reveniens, and French, revenir. And both of them mean returning or to come back. So, take your pick, whatever. So now in folklore, a revenant is stated to be a spirit or animated corpse that is believed to have been revived from death to haunt the living. So the word revenant can be used as a noun for ghost, but the revenants of medieval folklore, which is where we're going to focus on tonight, they're usually a bit more substantial than our usual idea of a ghost. And this is where our research begins.
And this is based on our extensive experience, correct?
Yeah, you got it. So, be it as it may. So first, it's important to note that the word vampire was first used in English in 1732. All right. And it was used in news reports about vampire, quote, epidemics in Eastern Europe. And the other thing that I want to note is that during the Middle Ages in England, Southeastern European legends about vampires were unknown. I mean, in fact, many of the characteristics of the creatures we know today as vampires, they only began emerging in European folktales in the 18th century. Okay. And during the Middle Ages, the idea that the dead might return to visit the living, it was present. It was certainly present, but not all the folk beliefs were written down. And it wasn't until the 1100s when a man named William of Newburgh, or Newbury, also known as William Parvis, he composed one of the most cherished accounts of England's history. Written in 5 chronicles or books, Historia Rerum Anglicarum, or History of English Affairs, was written, and it documents the history of 11th and 12th century England. And it's highly valued by historians as one of the most accurate and critical recollections of the time of William the Conqueror to Richard the Lionheart. So we're looking at 1066 to 1198. Now, make note that the word vampire didn't come around until 732. Okay.
1732, yeah.
Yes. So this period, the 1066 to 1198, it was really chaotic in England, and it's sometimes called the anarchy. Although I have to admit the years I followed were no less chaotic, but for some reason this period was called the anarchy. Anyway, along with an account of major military and political events of the time, William Newburgh's history also includes glimpses into everyday 12th century life, beliefs, and folklore. So in particular, William is the first English writer to recount tales about revenants. Now, it should be also noted that William's work was never completed, and it's believed that he died before finalizing his life's work. So we'll never know if there was more to the story, but he did say some very interesting things. Quote, "It would not be easy to believe that corpses of the dead should sally from their grave and should wander about to the terror and destruction of the living. Did not frequent examples occur in our own times, suffice to establish this as a warning to posterity, to the truth of which there is abundant testimony." Now, what's interesting
that
about
old
that,
English.
what's interesting about that is he is as a warning to posterity, okay? And he then goes on to say that the stories of revenants were so common that, quote, "Were I to write down all the instances of this kind which I have ascertained to have been befallen our times, the undertaking would be beyond measure laborious and troublesome."
Well, that sounds pretty ominous.
Yeah, I know it is. So, I mean, to every piece of folklore, there's usually some grain of truth. And I'm postulating that maybe there was more going on than most believed. And here's my evidence. So first, let's go over the characteristics of revenants. Not only did they have physical bodies, but they were also stronger and bigger than they were when they were alive. They were also heavier. They might nearly crush people with their weight. Revenants were often described as having physically left their graves, although they were not always visible to everyone at all times. Many were presented as reanimated corpses who physically interacted with the living in their spaces. So, for example, according to William, a man who died in Buckingham was laid to rest on the eve of the Lord's Ascension, and he rose the next night. He says that the revenant climbed into bed with his wife, nearly crushing her with his tremendous weight. He subjected her to the same terrifying ordeal the next night and would have done the same again the night after, but this time she was ready for him. She enlisted the help of others to guard her. Their shouting put him off trying to scare his wife again, so he made do with trying to scare his own brothers, quote, "in a similar manner." But they too had surrounded themselves with neighbors. So realizing he wasn't going to inflict his mischief on the humans that night, the revenant, quote, "rioted among animals." He also started to bother the living during the day, and when he was, quote, visible only to a few, he was visible only to a few. Eventually, the revenant's family and neighbors, they made a plea to the archdeacon and made him aware of the problem, and he in turn notified the Bishop of Lincoln. And the bishop consulted with others who claimed that these occurrences were not at all uncommon in England, and he suggested burning the revenant. Well, this was unpalatable to the bishop, and so instead he produced a letter of absolution, which was then placed on the revenant's chest, and after that the revenant's wanderings ceased.
Now, what made revenants so monstrous if they didn't try to feast on the living?
Okay, well, what's crazy is that they might knock on the dwellings of former neighbors and order them out or call them by name before moving on to the next house. I mean, it's the worst game of knock-a-door run ever. This sounds pretty mischievous. Although it may appear funny to us, there are some really sinister elements to these tales. So anyone that a revenant decided to target in this way, they could become ill and die. Tales featuring revenants also indicate that some of them were believed to have a real propensity for violence, and some were said to cause outbreaks of disease and wipe out entire villages. Although, unlike zombies, they were not victims of the disease themselves. There was also another report. The body of a deceased clergyman stole from his grave to plague the abbey and a woman in the town he once served. So the woman asked a monk to help her, who in turn vowed to stand guard over the grave at night. When the corpse again crept from the earth, the monks slashed at it, with an axe until it returned to the grave. And then the next day, a group of monks dug up the corpse, found it sleeping, quote, sleeping in a pool of its own blood, and the wounds inflicted from the axe. And they proceeded to burn the corpse to ashes in order to keep it from coming back. Some revenants actually had the ability to shapeshift. So in one story related by Abbot Geoffrey of Burton Abbey during the 12th century, 2 men who invoked the wrath of Saint Medwina, they died. They returned at dusk to it was a village that they had tried to stir up trouble against the abbey, and the saint was interred to. Occasionally they were seen carrying their coffins on their backs, but at other times they walked as bears and other animals. So, they could shapeshift. Now, to get rid of a revenant, it's reported to cut off its head, and sometimes accompanied with other forms of dismemberment. You could also remove the heart and burn the corpse. And in fact, burials which the deceased have been dismembered have been found in England dating back to before the Norman Conquest.
Before the Norman Conquest. That is going way back.
Yep, it is. Okay. So let's get down to the hypothesis part. So although we might be tempted to make comparisons with zombies, the folklore presents revenants as having a bit more going on upstairs than your average zombie today. Regardless of how they were reanimated, there's often a sense that some sort of intelligence is still actively at play. Something in the revenant is deliberately causing mischief and perhaps even enjoying it. So let's run down the facts, shall we? The word vampire didn't exist at this time. They rose from the grave. They are solid. They are stronger and heavier than when they were alive. Also, they like feasting on humans. They can be mischievous. They can cause disease that they themselves aren't victims of. They can cloak themselves. They don't like holy relics. And to get rid of one permanently, you have to dismember it, rip out the heart, and burn it. So, Dan, when given all the evidence, what would your hypothesis be?
Well, given all that evidence, there's a good chance that these weren't ghosts at all, as was hinted earlier, but instead some kind of pre-Norman vampire, an Anglo-Saxon vampire, perhaps?
That was my conclusion as well. I mean, the author and me could have so much fun with this. The disease that wipes out a village could be from drinking from them. The cloaking in day might be trying to hide from the sun. Or they might have just the ability to be invisible, which is a trope. And a trope we see with vampires is returning to loved ones post-mortem.
Well, that is a fascinating bit of folklore. Thank you very much for sharing, Eva.
And my hypothesis is based totally on our extensive experience in education.
We're writers. We write, we create things, we interpret things the way we like, and often we're right. We're writers.
But I think honestly calling a revenant a ghost is a little misleading here. So
yeah, it's a bit. I have to agree. Agreed. A program note: our next episode of VampChat will be February 19th, when we will speak with a poet named Manuel Arenas. Manuel has a prose poem about Dracula's brides called Weird Sisters 3, which was published in the latest edition of Spectral Realms magazine. We will talk about this and other vampire poems he's published. I think this will be a nice break from the long-form fiction that we usually feature on this show. Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to this. I didn't know there was vampire poetry. Do you know if Manuel will read some of it during the show? That would be a first for us.
Yes, Manuel tells me he will be thrilled to read one or two of his poems. And again, that'll be February 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern here on Podbean.
Awesome. I can't wait for that. I've never heard of a vampire poem, so this is awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
And they are really good.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I can't wait. Okay, it's time for us to reveal what vampire video content we've been consuming. And Dan, you've been rewatching a Swedish film from 2008.
Yes, I suspect some of our listeners may have seen Let the Right One In, which is an adaptation of the 2004 novel of the same name. So, Eva, let me set the scene for you.
Okay.
It's the early 1980s in Sweden. Snow is falling on Blackeberg, a working-class suburb of Stockholm. We see apartment blocks and functionally designed buildings, but nothing really nice to look at. Right away we meet Oscar, an intelligent but lonely boy of 12. He lives with his mother, has an absent father, and is frequently bullied at school. Oscar likes to stand in front of a tree in the courtyard and stick a knife into it, as if stabbing his tormentors. But he's a skinny kid who obviously can't defend himself. So one day he notices new people moving in next door, a middle-aged man and a young girl. They are Hakan and Ellie, and very quickly we learn what their relationship is about. We see Hakan go out alone with a butcher's knife, a gas canister with a mask attachment, a coil of rope, and a plastic container. Soon after, he accosts a stranger in a wooded area asking for the time. When the man checks his watch, Hakan subdues him by forcing the gas on him. Then he ties the rope around the victim's ankles and hoists him up until he's hanging by a tree branch upside down. Out comes the long knife, and Hakan slits the man's throat to collect blood in the container. But he's interrupted by a dog, and here's people approaching who are calling for the dog. So Hakan caps the container, which only has a little blood, and escapes. Later, we, the viewer, look into an apartment from the outside and see the girl, Ellie, yelling at Hakan and throwing a now empty container at him. Meanwhile, Oscar is out in the courtyard, stabbing the tree again, when he notices Ellie behind him standing on a climbing frame. She jumps down, and we see she's just wearing an untucked shirt with no coat in the middle of winter. They ask what each other is doing there, and she eventually says she's his neighbor, and then she flatly states that they can never be friends and leaves. Not much more happens in this scene, but we learn a couple things. One, Ellie knows where Oscar lives, and she's pretty sure she knows that he will be out there tomorrow night.
Okay.
And the next night, Ellie returns to the courtyard, where this time Oscar is trying to solve a popular puzzle at that time. Remember the 1980s? It's a Rubik's Cube.
Yep.
And
I think I
do you
still
have one of those still?
Still have mine.
I still have mine too. Never been able to solve it all the way, but I still have it. Ellie asks what it is, and he answers and explains how it works. Then he loans it to her, and as she starts turning the sides, Oscar leans in a bit to sniff her before asking, "What is that smell?" Unable to explain that, or maybe uninterested in explaining, Ellie just focuses on the Rubik's Cube, and Oscar goes back inside. We hear her stomach growl, and we get an ominous sense of what is about to happen next. Okay, new scene. Interior, night. We're in a diner when we see Hakan sitting alone. At the next table is a group of friends who are laughing and swapping stories. They make an attempt to involve Hakan, but he refuses to join them. One of the friends leaves, and soon after encounters Ellie sitting under a bridge, apparently crying. The man bends forward to talk to her, and she attacks him with an animal-like growl, biting his neck and drinking his blood, leaving him nearly dead. This is important. Ellie grabs the man's head with both of her hands and twists, breaking his neck, which is an important clue about finishing the job, which I'll get to later. By the way, this attack is witnessed by a neighbor who just happens to be looking out the window. Later, we see Hakan dump the body in a lake, while Ellie again visits Oscar in the courtyard, and this time she looks a lot better. Her hair's got some curl. She's wearing a nice sweater. She asks him if she smells better this time.
I'm curious about the focus on how she smells. So does the film explain it?
Not exactly, but I have used something similar in my own writing. If a vampire doesn't feed, they start to slowly decay. And this decay smells like, putrefaction, like when humans die. So I'm assuming the filmmakers are using a similar trope.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ellie solves the Rubik's Cube, something Oscar has not been able to do, and I have not been able to do.
Not without popping it apart.
Right. So the two begin talking, and Oscar asks, "How old are you?" And she answers, 12, more or less. What about you? And shocked, Oscar replies, 12 years, 8 months, and 9 days. What do you mean, more or less? So he asks about her birthday, which she doesn't know, and we begin to understand that she is as disconnected and isolated as he is, and this becomes the basis of their friendship. The next day, we see Oscar studying Morse code, which he will then teach Ellie, and this is how they will communicate by tapping the wall separating their apartments.
So, quick question. How does Ellie's protector, Hakan, feel about this budding relationship?
It's clear that he's more jealous than concerned that they will be exposed. Hakan, and this is made much more explicitly in the novel, he is a pedophile who is attracted to Ellie, which I guess explains his loyalty to her. But he's also afraid of Ellie, so he doesn't act on this jealousy toward Oscar. I will give you a few more plot points before I share my impressions. Hakan goes out a second time to hunt for Ellie, and he goofs again. This time he tries to harvest blood from a teenage boy, but the victim wakes up while he's upside down, and he starts yelling for help. Now, as more and more people approach, Hakan realizes he's trapped, so he takes the extreme measure of pouring acid on his face to make him unrecognizable. He horribly disfigured. He winds up in a hospital where Ellie finds him. The two share a final, I guess, kind of tender moment before Ellie drinks his blood and then chucks him out the window. We see his body crash against a dumpster before hitting the ground. Now, with Hakan dead, Ellie has to fend for herself. One night she ambushes a woman and drinks her blood, but is interrupted by bystanders. That means Ellie didn't have time to break the woman's neck, and this results in the victim slowly turning into a vampire. She eventually dies, she eventually dies in her hospital bed when an orderly pulls back the curtain, letting the sun in, and this newly created vampire burns to death. I mention this scene because it continues the cinematic trope of vampires burning under the sun, but more importantly, it makes us think of other tropes, and I'm thinking of the one that's hinted at in the film's title.
And that would be the one that says that vampire must be invited into someone's home. It's right there.
Yeah. And interpreting this a little further, the title seems to suggest if you're going to let a vampire in, make sure it's the right one. And this is what singer Morrissey appears to be getting at with his song from the 1990s called Let the Right One In, which inspired the novel and later the film.
You know, I've always wondered what happens to a vampire if they step into a house uninvited. I mean, does the film address this?
It does, in a very memorable scene. One night, Ellie knocks on Oscar's door, and Oscar, in a moment of feeling kind of powerful, refuses to say the words. He just, arms crossed, he just waits for her to step in, which she does. And then she starts bleeding from her eyes and her ears. Her skin starts to split open, and horrified, Oscar grabs her and says, "Stop, I invite you into my home." And Ellie starts to heal. The last scene I want to talk about is at the end of the film. Oscar is on a train leaving Blackeberg, and he's sitting next to a wooden box. We hear a series of taps coming from within the box, and we understand it's Morse code. If you're looking at the subtitles, Ellie is spelling kiss, and Oscar responds by tapping little kiss. It seems like a truly sweet moment between them. It's a happy ending until you recognize that with Hakan gone, Oscar is now in charge of Ellie's care, and he will be the one who must make sure she's properly fed as he grows older and she remains stuck in a preteen body.
Oh my God, you know what I just realized is he's got a bad job. This type
that's the theme tonight, isn't it?
Eloquently with Todd's story.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
But I mean, how terrible for Oscar. I mean, at least he has Ellie as a friend, but maybe he'll be more competent than Hakan, but there's no getting around the idea that he'll have to kill for her and maybe sacrifice his own life like Hakan did. I mean, that's horrible. Yeah. It's a horrible job.
Yeah, and that's what makes this tale so disturbing. Having said that, Ellie is a powerful protector that any bullied kid would want to have. And in the penultimate scene, Oscar is nearly drowned in a pool by his tormentors. And Ellie comes in and she massacres them. We see the whole thing from underwater, watching a severed arm float by Oscar's head, then another boy being pushed like a speedboat toward the other edge of the pool. And then just as Oscar's about to drown, Ellie lifts him out of the water. I absolutely loved this scene and applaud how the director and cinematographer captured this moment using practical effects. And it's the use of practical effects that makes this film really special for me. Only once do we see the use of CG, and that's a scene, kind of a crazy scene involving dozens of cats attacking their owner. It's funny, kind of frightening at the same time, but the scene does stand out as looking a tad artificial.
So, Dan, I seem to recall an American remake of this film. I mean, if I'm thinking correctly, it was directed by Matt Reeves. Is that right?
Yes. It's called Let Me In, released in 2010. It stars Chloe Grace Moretz and Cody Smith McPhee, and it's set in New Mexico. It's good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that film, except I can't help thinking, why make a shot-for-shot remake when the original was so good?
True.
However, I get that subtitles are an issue for some people. So yeah, in that case, Let Me In is a fine alternative. And apparently there's a streaming series that I've only recently learned about that maybe I'll review one day.
Yep.
I need to also say that the performances are great. I loved Corey Hedebrandt as Oscar and Lena Lee Anderson as Ellie, although another actor was hired to dub in her voice to make Ellie sound more mature. Now, before I end this review, I do need to address one scene that may confuse some viewers, and it confused me when I first saw this film. At one point, Oscar gets a glimpse of Ellie changing clothes, and we briefly see a large, jagged scar over her pubic area. And we don't get any explanation for this. But everything, I assure you, is explained in the novel, which is a much darker and horrific tale than the film. I should also note that the novel and the screenplay were both written by John Ajvide Lindqvist. So that scar reveal in the film may be a way for the screenwriter to get people to read his book, which is what I did. And I did learn the awful origin of that scar.
Okay, so if you want to know, read the book.
Read the book. It is excellent.
Oh, man. So, it's so funny that you chose to do this, and Todd, like, we're just having a dark episode. It's just butchering and skin. I love this. We're just having just this really dark, horrific, vamp chat.
Yeah, you're right. And, during some of the darkest days of the year, it's still, January. And one other thing that I didn't mention about this film is that the snow falling almost feels, and the ice forming almost feels like another character in the film. I think the filmmakers did a really good job of doing that.
Nice. All right. Here on VampChat, we have a rating system, and that's 1 to 20 drops of blood, with 20 being the highest. So, Dan, how much blood will you spill for the Swedish film Let the Right One In?
I was going to give it 20.
Wow.
But then I had to dock at a point for, again, treating it just as a film here, just as a cinematic, experience. The scar reveal without context, I think, was probably the wrong thing for the director to do. Otherwise, this would be a perfect film. So I'm going to give it 19.
You liked it that much.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 19 drops of blood.
Nice. Very nice. And you've seen, now just out of context, what would you give the remake? Putting you on the spot.
I'll struggle a little bit and say 18, fine.
For the lack of subtitles, right?
Well, you know what I'm saying. It's a shot-by-shot remake. The actors are good. The direction seems to be fine. Cinematography and everything. There's nothing wrong with it. But I kept thinking, well, why? But for subtitles, I get it. That's a barrier for folks. So I would give that 18. But we're not reviewing that today. So I feel like maybe I can change my mind at some point.
Well, and I have seen the show, the series. Okay. And it is very different. So instead of the relationship of, the pedophile to the child vampire, the vampire is actually his daughter. And so in the show, you have that dynamic of, truly loving the child and needing to help and doing anything to help get blood for that child. So it's a very different dynamic. And my question is does the film ever get into how Hakan and Ellie came about, or how they ended up, I mean, she's choosing a pedophile for a keeper, and do they ever get into that dynamic?
They never do, but at the end, as she's in the box, Morse coding, kiss, and you have that tender moment between Oscar and Ellie. It occurred to me that it's possible, for the context of this film, they want you to maybe to think or wonder if Hakan started out at Oscar's age in their relationship, and that Oscar is somehow following in his footsteps.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, that's our show. So be sure to join us February 19th for a special poetry edition of VampChat with our guest, Manuel Arenas.
And Eva, I'm feeling really good about this season.
I am too. But I'd feel a lot better if we had a sponsor. So, because we want to keep improving VampChat. We really do.
Yeah, and improvements do require outside investment. So if you want to inform our rapidly growing audience about your business or upcoming event,
then this is a great opportunity for those looking to reach folks who read about vampires, watch films or TV shows about the undead, and who are more likely to attend events geared toward their fellow creatures of the night.
To sponsor VampChat, just email us at vampchatwithdanandeva@gmail.com, or just reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram, and we look forward to introducing your business or event to our audience.
And if you're just a fan of VampChat, we love to hear from our fans, so please, please, please get in touch with us. All right, children of the night, we wish you safe dreams.
Just keep an eye open for those creatures of the night.
And if you can't sleep, we have vampire books to recommend. Be sure to sink your teeth into Dan's novel, Fiona's Guardians.
Or this might be a perfect night to devour Eva's novel, A Fury.
All right, and with that,
we bid you